In this video, we're going to tell you everything you need to know about Ultraman, a golden goon. Before we begin, there are more or less 3 to 5 characters in DC's multiverse history that bear the Ultraman name and can be considered a sort of mainline version of the character, and these are the ones that we're going to tell you about today, starting with the first ever Ultraman of DC Comics. The first Ultraman was created by Gardner Fox and Mike Sokowski all the way back in the Silver Age of the superhero comics. It was within the pages of August 1964's Justice League of America issue 29 that we first meet this villainous version of the Man of Steel. This particular version of Ultraman's origin story pretty much ticks the same boxes as Superman from Earth 1, except Ultraman came from a different reality known as Earth 3, and for the sake of convenience we'll mainly be referring to this version of Ultraman as pre-Crisis Ultraman. Now, Earth 3's planet Krypton didn't share the same fate as most of the other Kryptons in DC's wider multiverse, and by that we mean that the planet didn't explode into space dust, which prompted baby Kal-El's parents to evacuate him on board one of their doomed home ships. But here's the thing, the reason behind pre-Crisis Ultraman's arrival on Earth 3 was never specified. There's also the fact that this particular version of the Big Blue Boy Scout didn't have a weakness to that old green rock kryptonite. The opposite applies actually. Kryptonite was the thing that gave Ultraman his unbelievable abilities. It's his version of the yellow sun's rays. Baby Ultraman would first encounter kryptonite on his way to Earth, and when he got to his new home, he'd come across more of the exotic mineral, which in turn jacked him up further until he became a very strong alien growing up on Earth 3. When the boy came of age, he ultimately branded himself as Ultraman, and given his absurd power, did the most logical thing, using his devastating abilities to conquer the world. Along the way, he met like-minded metahumans who also shared the same passion for conquest, such as Owlman and Superwoman. And from there, they formed a super evil version of the Justice League known as the Crime Syndicate of America. Given Earth's 3's supposed protectors all turned out to be a couple of bad eggs, Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate easily took over Earth. And just like Alexander the Great conquering the known world during his time, Ultraman wept. There was nothing worthy of his skills and time anymore in this reality. This prompted him to look for other dimensions out there until he came across the mainline DCU, Earth 1. Ultraman thought that fighting with its champions, mainly Superman and the Justice League of America, would prove to be a good way to spend the weekend. Unfortunately for them, Earth 1's greatest superheroes had their own interdimensional allies. After a huge battle, Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate ended up getting their butts handed to them, after which they were imprisoned in an extra-dimensional jail created by Hal Jordan. Ultraman and his crew would eventually find their way out of this prison, and not long after, the Lex Luthors of both Earth 1 and 2 devised a plan to wreck their respective homeworlds and take over Earth 3. So the Luthor duo recruited Ultraman to fulfill this dream, and the evil Kryptonian agreed. Now, Earth 3 wasn't completely out of heroes. They had a guy named Alexander Luthor, who happened to be the dad of the Earth 3's own version of Lex. Alexander Sr. stood against the combined might of Ultraman and the two Luthors, but he didn't have a chance against them. So he recruited OG Superman of Earth 1 and the Superman of Earth 2 to help combat the looming threat on Earth 3. It initially didn't work. Ultraman dunked on both Kal-Els of Earth 1 and 2 when they got into their scrap. However, Alexander Sr. ultimately came up clutch and helped our heroes defeat and imprison Ultraman once again. Escaping prison, battling Alexander Sr., and then going back to prison became routine for Ultraman and his crime syndicate over this period of time. This whole cycle only ended during the Crisis of Infinite Earths storyline, where the multiversal threat known as the antimatter set its sights on Earth 3. The antimatter was such a problem that Ultraman and the crime syndicate were forced to team up with their arch rival Alexander Sr. in order to fight the hulking cosmic baddie. But no dice, the antimatter won in the end, destroying Earth 3 and everyone in it. And since Crisis on Infinite Earths was DC Comics' first attempt at trying to make sense of their fictional universe, it ultimately came to be that this version of Ultraman, along with his pals in the crime syndicate and all of Earth 3, were written out of existence. That, guys, is the end of the first Ultraman, but in no way was this the last time we're going to see this supervillain, the Ultraman we know and not love. Ultraman would be reborn in DC's post-crisis continuity in the year 2000. This came in the form of Grant Morrison's now classic JLA Earth 2 story. Now, this version of Ultraman had a different origin than its counterpart. In this one, Ultraman was just an astronaut who had the rank of lieutenant named Clark Kent. He lived in a dimension known as the antimatter universe and lived in a country called the United States of America. And that's America with a K. In the beginning, Lieutenant Clark Kent was well loved by his nation. Just like the OG Big Blue Boy Scout, he also had a romantic partner named Lois Lane. On a side note, the Lois Lane of this reality turned out to be Superwoman, who would become part of Ultraman's crime syndicate later. Clark eventually became the supervillain known as Ultraman when one of his space missions went awry and a group of unspecified extraterrestrials came across his body. These aliens then experimented on him in hopes of creating a superweapon, turning his once human body into an engine that basically converted a substance known as anti-kryptonite into energy. Long story short, the post-crisis version of Ultraman was born. Things didn't go so well for these aliens, however, as Ultraman took out each and every one of them the moment he got his wits about him. And then he returned to Earth. And as they say, when you have lemons, you make lemonade, and in this case though, if you have godlike powers, you make everyone kneel before you. So Ultraman gathered the other meta-humans on his homeworld who also wanted a piece of the proverbial pie and formed the post-crisis version of the crime syndicate. And just to prove that this iteration of Ultraman was irredeemably bad, we find out that he had his own version of Crypto. His name was Neutro, and let's just say Ultraman wasn't so nice to him and saw to it that Neutro went to the countryside farm. As you'd expect, Ultraman and the crime syndicate managed to subjugate their world in the wake of their conquest. To oppose them, the antimatter universe's own Lex Luthor made his own moves. First, he sought the help of the mainline DCU's Justice League, but their fight was inconclusive, as the Justice League ultimately had to go back to their home reality before the bout could end. Still, Antimatter Lex eventually continued the fight, forming his own team of heroes made out of other champions from his native reality. Sometime later, Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate would have another run-in with the OG Superman when they attempted to take out their so-called Super Baby from Kal-El's Fortress of Solitude. It would be revealed that this baby was the Brainiac of the Antimatter universe, and it would combine itself with Ultraman's genes. From there, Brainiac would attempt to destroy everything. Given that Brainiac had turned into a multiversal threat, Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate opposed it. In the end, Brainiac was taken down when his own wife took him out, while Ultraman and his pals went back to their antimatter universe. We eventually discovered that Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate remained in power in their homeworld. In fact, their rule became so absolute that they ended up getting bored of the whole day-to-day handling of things. So one day, one of the Crime Syndicate's members, Power Ring, proposed that they go to a planet called Quard to blow off some steam. So they go there and start wreaking havoc like they usually do. Their fun was only interrupted when a reality-bending cataclysm suddenly occurred. This then led to Ultraman and his pals setting sights on the mainline DCU, which had since been rebranded as Earth Zero in post-crisis continuity. You see, this cataclysm allowed them to change places with their counterparts from Earth Zero. So Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate took it upon themselves to impersonate the Justice League of the mainline DCU. Ultraman eventually found out that it sucked posing as Superman, because unlike in his home reality, no one really feared Kal-El, and that was the one thing that got Ultraman's rocks off. Ultraman ultimately dropped the ruse. In time, the OG Justice League returned to Earth Zero and fought with Ultraman and his Crime Syndicate, and it ended with the JL's starting roster losing to their evil counterparts. With the A-listers out of the way, Ultraman and his pals continued ruling over the mainline DCU's world. However, a collection of Justice League's second stringers managed to bring the fight against the Crime Syndicate and drive them off the planet. Afterwards, Ultraman and his team searched for the Justice League's A-team and found them on the same planet they were bullying not too long ago, Quard. Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate first witnessed the inhabitants of Quard locked in battle with the Justice League, so they decided to just sit by and watch as they ripped each other apart. However, their popcorn party was cut short when the Guardians spotted the crime syndicate and decided to direct their attention towards Ultraman and his pals. They found themselves in a stalemate against them, and when they forced the crime syndicate to team up with the Justice League in order to defeat their mutual enemy. In the end, the combined forces of the JL and the crime syndicate was enough to bring down the Quard's warriors. When the dust settled, Ultraman's ally Owlman, the evil version of Batman, returned the Justice League to their native reality. Although you should note that Earth Zero's people had become really against metahumans during this period, all because of Ultraman and the crime syndicate's invasion. Not long after, Ultraman and his dastardly team would mess with the mainline DCU yet again when they started kidnapping Earth Zero's inhabitants to use as slaves. This prompted the Justice League to pay the antimatter universe a visit again to demand the return of the people they kidnapped. Surprisingly enough, the JL's encounter with the crime syndicate didn't instantly dissolve into a classic superhero v supervillain fight, and it's all thanks to the crime syndicate owing a debt of gratitude to the Justice League back when they teamed up against the Guardians. Still, Ultraman and his pals weren't going to back down from their scummy plans. They even kidnapped their own reality's version of Jimmy Olsen and used him as a hostage to prevent the League from getting to them. The Justice League and the Crime Syndicate decided to have negotiations. Superman would parlay with the crime syndicate alone soon after, and to Ultraman's credit, he was reasonable when he offered the release of the people they kidnapped to the Justice League. But OG Supes, being the softy that he was, those terms just weren't enough. He and the Justice League wanted to save everybody, including the people of the antimatter universe that Ultraman and his allies had taken over. As you'd expect, this whole meeting came to a boiling point and a fight erupted between the JL and the crime syndicate. In the end, Earth Zero came out on top and managed to imprison the crime syndicate in another dimension. Sometime later, Ultraman and his pals once again found themselves free in their native world. However, their rival, Alexander Luthor, had come up with a device that was meant to put an end to the crime syndicate once and for all. A so-called matter bomb. The matter bomb was supposed to nuke the crime syndicate to smithereens, but it was one destructive weapon as it ended up destroying a huge chunk of their homeworld. Alexander's plans didn't exactly work because the crime syndicate found a way to transport his matter bomb to an entirely different Earth. And to make matters worse, Ultraman and the crime syndicate made their way back to Earth Zero after this whole thing. And from there, Ultraman proposed that they attempt to conquer Earth Zero once more, but his crime syndicate pals weren't really feeling it. Besides, the Justice League caught wind of their return, which then sparked another confrontation between the two teams. Ultraman would encounter the powerful entity known as the Omega Man. He'd then decide to screw over the crime syndicate and team up with the Omega Man in hopes of ruling Earth Zero with him. But in the end, the Justice League pooled their forces and managed to banish Ultraman, Omega Man, and the crime syndicate to the wider DC Multiverse. And this is where post-Crisis Ultraman's story ends. As we discover farther down the line, this version of the supervillain still exists in the DCU in spite of a couple reboots later. The new Ultraman. And so we arrive at another point in DC Comics history when they decided to reboot their characters for an easy entry point for new readers. This came in the form of DC Comics' New 52 initiative back in 2011. To put it simply, the New 52 was meant to rebuild the entire DC universe from the ground up. As such, tons of characters were either retconned or straight up reinvented during this time. Ultraman was one of them. So New 52 Ultraman had yet another different origin story compared to his pre-crisis and post-crisis counterparts. In this reality, Ultraman was once a native of the planet Krypton of an alternate dimension designated as Earth 3. His birth name was Kal-El, and he was the son of a nutjob Kryptonian scientist now named Jor-El. Jor-El was such a scumbag that he ended up directing the anti-monitor to his home planet, which it then promptly destroyed. In fact, Jor-El was such a prime-cut piece of jerk that the only reason that he secured an escape pod for Kal-El was to use the boy as a pawn to get revenge against the anti-monitor. Now, Kal-El's escape pod was preloaded with a bunch of Darwinian nonsense that Jor-El installed as an in-flight entertainment during the boy's trip. Kal-El eventually landed on his native reality's version of Earth, where he then forced an unwitting couple named Martha and Johnny Kent of Smallville, Kansas, to be his mom and dad. As he grew up, he came across shards of his destroyed home planet, which in turn gave him his superpowers. And when his 7th birthday rolled in, he decided to do away with his foster parents. He even burnt the Kent farm down. From then on, Kal-El started calling himself Ultraman and promptly began his conquest of Earth. As in the DC realities that preceded it, New 52 Ultraman would end up forming the Crime Syndicate and eventually rule over the planet. It was all fun times for Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate until the Anti-Monitor arrived at Earth's doorstep, and as you'd expect, the Anti-Monitor made moves to take down Earth. Unknown to them, the Dread Lord Darkseid was causing trouble in the wider DC Multiverse. Darkseid's actions ended up opening an interdimensional wormhole on Earth 3, which allowed Ultraman and his villainous friends to escape the destruction of their world. But this caused most of the Crime Syndicate to become trapped in between universes for half a decade, with only two of its members, Atomica and the Outsider, successfully making their way to the mainline DCU, which at the time was called Prime Earth. Eventually, the Outsider managed to grab an artifact called Pandora's Box and use it to send Ultraman and the rest of the Crime Syndicate to Prime Earth. They then almost immediately took down the Justice League and started conquering this new world. From there, Ultraman would do a ton of scummy deeds. For one, he blocked out Prime Earth's sun since its rays are his weakness. Then he tried to force OG Lois Lane into becoming his partner shortly after, and if not for Black Adam's intervention, Lois would have been an unwilling mom to Ultraman's baby. Then, there was the time Ultraman took out the classic Superman villain Metallo's kryptonite heart, so that he could literally snort it and get significantly stronger. Now, during this period, Prime Earth's usual rogues such as Lex Luthor, Sinestro, and Black Adam had formed their own team to stop the crime syndicate called the Injustice League. Eventually, Ultraman and his friends' wave of terror only came to a stop when one of the Injustice League's members, Sinestro, took out the crime syndicate's power ring, which then caused a multiversal tremor to occur. This tremor invited the Anti-Monitor to Prime Earth's doorstep, which forced Ultraman and the crime syndicate to fight in a two-pronged war against the Injustice League and the Anti-Monitor. Now, the New 52 also rebooted Ultraman's arch-rival Alexander Luthor. In this new continuity, Alexander was an evil, insane version of the superhero Shazam. He went by the name of Mazaz, which is Shazam backwards. And we're not kidding. Mazaz might be one supremely bad egg, but he had no love for Ultraman. The crime syndicate had been holding Mazaz even prior to their subjugation of Prime Earth, but during this war, the Injustice League was able to free him so he could help take down Ultraman and his pals. A twist happens when the crime syndicate's superwoman, who happened to be Ultraman's girlfriend, revealed that the child that she was carrying was in fact fathered by Mazaz. This made Ultraman go all crazy and go after his arch-rival. In the end, Ultraman lost this bout after running out of juice. With Ultraman the only villain left standing, he tried to go after Prime Earth Lex, but with the help of Sinestro and Black Adam, the Injustice League was able to stop the rampaging Ultraman. In the aftermath, the Justice League was re-established on Prime Earth, and they sent Ultraman right to supervillain jail. Sometime later, Ultraman was able to escape his prison thanks to the efforts of the villains Volthoom and Grid, and then they recruited him in fighting the Anti-Monitor. Wanting some payback for what the Anti-Monitor did to Earth 3, Ultraman agreed to this proposal. He and the Anti-Monitor eventually threw hands, which didn't end well for Ultraman. He got vaporized, and this is where this Ultraman story ends. Ultraman reborn again and again. DC Comics opted for another reboot called DC Rebirth. Now, we won't get into it too much, but DC Rebirth was meant to bring back pre-New 52 continuity and combined it with cherry-picked elements from the New 52. Ultraman and his crime syndicate were brought back to life in the wake of the New 52 universe's end. The multiverse itself was the one who did this, resurrecting yet another rebooted version of Earth 3. Prime Earth's Superboy accidentally found his way to this corrupted world where he came across Ultraman and his crime syndicate. Ultraman was able to capture Superboy and imprison him in a volcano, where he eventually turned the teen superhero into an unwilling listener to his secret sob stories. But everything worked out in the end, as Superboy was able to escape after some time. But not long after, the evil god known as Perpetua would emerge in the multiverse. Ultraman and the crime syndicate would ally themselves with Perpetua to help her fulfill her grand plan of remaking the entire multiverse. But as always, things didn't work out for Ultraman. This time, Ultraman's end came at the hands of one of his crime syndicate allies, Owlman. You see, Owlman was a megalomaniac like Ultraman, but he wasn't completely on board for the Perpetua's plans for multiversal reboots. So Owlman betrayed his allies and took out Ultraman. The last time we see this version of Ultraman was when Prime Earth's Batman used the Black Lantern ring and used him as his zombie puppet against the Darkest Knight, aka the Batman who laughs. But this is DC Comics we're talking about, and one death just means another reboot or reset or retcon. And now we've entered the Infinite Frontier era of DC Comics, which came after the DC Multiverse was destroyed for the upteenth time at the end of their Rebirth initiative. This time, a group of cosmic beings known as the Hands rebuilt a quote-unquote all-new, all-different multiverse, and Earth 3 was part of it. With yet another resurrection also came a retooled origin story for Ultraman. Much like his New 52 iteration, this Ultraman was the last surviving member of his race, the Kryptonians of Earth 3. But this time, he had the same name as the Man of Steel, Kal-El, spelt the same way too. And this is where the similarities end though, because on Earth 3, Kal-El landed in Smallville, Kansas, where he met the Kents, but the Ma and Pa of Kent of this reality are a couple of grade A scumbags who only adopted Kal so they could use him for free labor on their farm. Talk about thinking big. Along the way, the Kents brainwashed Kal into never leaving their farm so that he could be their slave forever. It was because of this desire to continue having free labor that Ma and Pa decided to reveal Kal-El's true origins to him. In their mind, letting the boy know he was the last member of his species would make him afraid to leave them. Fortunately, Kal-El was smarter than that, so when he learned about his roots and realized that Ma and Pa Kent had basically turned him into their slave, Kal promptly dispatched them. From there, this version of Ultraman pretty much follows the same threads as his predecessors, such as Kal starting to adopt the Ultraman name and meeting up with Earth 3's other evil metahumans and forming the Crime Syndicate, and then beginning their conquest of the world. Eventually, Ultraman's time with the Crime Syndicate ended on a sour note during the War for Earth 3 storyline, which saw the rest of the Crime Syndicate screwing him over. This ultimately led to Ultraman becoming a prisoner within the Phantom Zone and Earth 3 getting cut off from the rest of the DC Multiverse, all thanks to Prime Earth Amanda Waller's efforts. Some time would pass and Ultraman would find himself free once again, but this time he got his hands on a contraption that gave him the ability to siphon power from his own counterparts living in other realities. On top of that, this device also allowed Ultraman to travel the multiversal lanes and visit other universes. So Ultraman decided to go on a tear through the DC Multiverse with the specific goal of eliminating any and all versions of Superman he could find. Eventually, Earth 2's Superman, Val Zod, and Jonathan Kent, Prime Earth's super son, teamed up in an attempt to stop Ultraman. Their initial run-in against the Mad Kryptonian happened in a universe designated as Earth 49. John and Val were even joined by the superhero Red Tornado, but in spite of their efforts, Ultraman proved to be too much of a problem. For one, Ultraman kicked Val and the Red Tornado's butts into the Phantom Zone, and then he subdued John. However, this confrontation allowed John to go full shonen protagonist and unlock powers he never knew he had, which allowed him to mount a counterattack against Ultraman. Still, it wasn't enough to take him out for good. So after eating up one of John's punches, Ultraman flew back into the fight and started smacking down the boy, threatening him with another volcano imprisonment, and even going as far as to tell John that he was going to take out his mom, Lois. But then Earth 49 Superman arrived to save the day. But here's the thing, Earth 49 goes by another nickname, Earth Injustice. And if you're not familiar with the Injustice timeline, this world's Superman is an absolute menace. It's a version of the Man of Steel who successfully took control of the world and became its supreme leader, taking out heroes and villains who stood in his way. So when Injustice Superman arrived on the scene and saw Ultraman, he gave this unwanted visitor his own brand of justice, a quick, fatal twist of the neck.